Hello, I'm Dilek Tuna and you're watching A News. Let's take a look at today's top stories. The US says it shot down an Iranian drone flying towards its aircraft carrier. Russia launches its most powerful attack on Kyiv this year, battering energy facilities ahead of talks in Abu Dhabi. And thousands of Epstein documents taken down after victims identified. US President Donald Trump says the US is negotiating with Iran on a new nuclear deal. The confirmation comes after an Iranian drone was shot down near the Abraham Lincoln carrier and threats to a US flagged tanker. It's ahead of Friday's talks, which will now be held in Oman and not Turkey, as first agreed.
US President Donald Trump said that the United States is currently negotiating with Iran. The announcement came after Tehran requested that planned talks be held in Oman rather than Turkey.
Are they negotiations from Iran?
The rollover, but they are negotiating. They'd like to do something, and we'll see if something is going to be done. They had a chance to do something a while ago, and it didn't work out, and we did Midnight Hammer. I don't think they want that happening again, but they would like to negotiate. We are negotiating with them right now, yes.
Mr. President, where will the meeting be? It seems like it's
I can't tell
changing.
you that.
Mr. President,
There's more than one meeting. Yeah, please.
Earlier on Tuesday, the US military said it shot down an Iranian Shahed 139 drone approaching the Abraham Lincoln aircraft carrier in the Arabian Sea. Navy Captain Tim Hawkins said the drone was destroyed by an F-35 fighter jet in self-defense, with no American personnel or equipment harmed. In a separate incident in the Strait of Hormuz, Iran's Revolutionary Guard harassed a US-flagged merchant vessel, but authorities say the situation was diffused with the escort of a US Navy ship. Meanwhile, US Special Envoy Steve Witkoff visited Israel to discuss nuclear talks with Iran and the next phase of the Gaza ceasefire plan ahead of Friday's planned meeting with Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi. Saudi and Egyptian officials are also expected to attend. Trump linked the diplomatic efforts to the US military presence in the area, warning, "We have ships heading to Iran. If we can work something out, that would be great, and if we can't, probably bad things would happen." Iranian officials insist that sanctions relief must be part of any deal. Regional mediators, including Turkey, have urged de-escalation. Experts say Friday's talks could provide a crucial opportunity to ease tensions between Washington and Tehran.
US President Donald Trump signed a major funding bill on Tuesday, ending a partial government shutdown that began on Saturday. The package was approved by the Senate on Friday and later passed by the House of Representatives. The legislation will fund most US government departments until the end of the financial year on the 30th of September, including defense, education, healthcare, labor, transport and housing. Funding for the Department of Homeland Security, however, has been extended only until the 13th of February. Last year's shutdown lasted 43 days, furloughing hundreds of thousands of workers and costing the US economy about $11 billion. Russia launched its most power attack this year on Ukraine's battered energy facilities, killing 2 people. Ukraine's president said the strikes violated Russia's agreement with Trump to hold off from attacking its energy systems in the depths of a freezing winter.
At least 2 people have been killed as Russia launched its largest air attack of the year on Ukraine's energy infrastructure overnight, according to authorities. President Volodymyr Zelensky says there were a record number of ballistic missiles and drones that were fired. Power plants and critical infrastructure in Kyiv and several other regions were hit as temperatures fell to minus 20 degrees Celsius. Ukraine's largest private energy company, DTEK, described the assault as the most powerful blow to the energy sector this year. More than 1,000 apartment buildings in the capital were left without heating, while a thermal power plant in the eastern city of Kharkiv was damaged beyond repair. There was no immediate comment from Moscow. President Zelensky accused Russia of choosing escalation over diplomacy, saying Moscow had used a brief pause in attacks to stockpile weapons and prepare for renewed strikes.
The war must be stopped. But if the world, America and Europe do not have the power to stop Russian strikes, then who will believe there is the power to guarantee that the war will not reignite again? Pressure is needed so that Russia has motivation to invest in diplomacy rather than a war of destruction.
NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte, speaking during a visit to Kiev, condemned the attack and urged alliance members to increase air defense support for Ukraine.
And that is an attack, again, on innocent civilians, on civilian infrastructure, which I think is unacceptable. And this has nothing to do with winning a war or fighting a war, which, as I said, in itself was unprovoked, starting on the 24th of February 2022. But this is creating chaos.
The attack comes days after a US-backed energy ceasefire expired and comes ahead of another round of US-coordinated talks between Ukrainian and Russian negotiators in Abu Dhabi later this week.
NATO Secretary-General Mark Rutte met with NATO representatives in Kyiv and alongside Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky honoured victims of the war with Russia. Our correspondent Anita Sharma has more.
Welcome to This Day in Europe and a high-profile visit to Kyiv by NATO's Secretary-General. Mark Rutte met with NATO representatives stationed in Kyiv, then traveled to Maidan Square, where alongside President Zelensky, a candle was lit to honor victims of Russia's war of aggression. Rutte highlighted some of NATO initiatives sustaining Ukraine's war effort, including the Prioritized Ukraine Requirements List, or PEARL. Since last summer, it supplied about 75% of Ukraine's Patriot missiles and 90% of missiles used in other air defense systems. Standing in front of a civilian heating plant, Rutte posted a video on X describing how the plant was hit by 5 Russian missiles to, quote, create chaos and fear in ordinary citizens living in Ukraine.
I'm standing here in Kiev. I just arrived this morning with a small NATO delegation. We had good meetings with the President Zelensky. I was in the Rada, the parliament here. We'll have more meetings later today. But this is a heating plant, heating 1,100 of these big Kiev apartment blocks. Up to 500,000 people living there. And this plant was hit last night by 5 Russian missiles without any use in terms of military aids. It's only to create chaos and fear in ordinary citizens living in Ukraine and destroying civilian infrastructure. Again, without any military impact at all. So just to create that fear and that chaos. But the Ukrainian people will not be broken. I'm also here to, again, make clear to the Ukrainian people that NATO stands with Ukraine. We are helping, of course, in getting the training done and all the military stuff delivered to Ukraine. Ukraine needs to stay in the fight. And NATO allies, the United States and Europeans, are working together to make sure that the security guarantees are in place, that the day when a peace deal is done or there is a long-term ceasefire, Putin knows that if he attacks again, the reaction will be devastating. That's crucial. And the Ukrainians want that peace deal as soon as possible. But it has to be honorable, recognizing, of course, their sovereign rights going forward. So, again, working hard to achieve that. My respect for the Ukrainian people, and NATO stands with Ukraine now and in the future.
The NATO chief also said he had a good meeting with Zelensky and that it's important to reaffirm continued support for Ukraine. The show of solidarity comes at a time when Ukraine and its allies face difficult strategic decisions. Rutte stressed that reaching a deal to end the war will require tough choices. The timing of his visit comes as NATO continues to broaden its strategy. Alliance officials confirmed that NATO started military planning for an Arctic mission in response to heightened Russian activity in the high north and the region's growing strategic significance, signaling that Europe's security concerns now extend far beyond the Eastern Front. As the war in Ukraine continues, NATO's evolving posture, from planning in the Arctic to political engagement in Kyiv, illustrates just how the alliance is adjusting in real time to a security landscape that shows no signs of letting up. For A News, I'm Anita Sharma in Arnhem, Netherlands.
Thousands of documents related to the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein have been removed from the US Department of Justice's website. It's after victims and their lawyers warned that sensitive personal details had been made public. They said that the disclosure placed dozens of survivors at risk and was causing distress.
The US Department of Justice says it's taken down all flagged documents after victims said their identities had been compromised in the release of the Epstein files. Thousands of documents have been removed from its website. Lawyers for the victims of the late sex offender Jeffrey Epstein said email addresses and nude images were included, which could allow some victims to be identified. They say it's disrupted the lives of nearly 100 survivors. In a statement, they described the disclosure as outrageous and said they should not be named, scrutinized, or re-traumatized. The Justice Department said it blames technical or human error and added that it is reviewing further requests and checking whether more documents need redaction. Asked about transparency, US President Donald Trump said some victims were unhappy with the released material and argued that the country should move on to other issues.
Do you think that they should be more transparent?
The fact that they thought they released too much. I heard that, and you tell me something else. No. I think it's really time for the country to get onto something else, really. Now that nothing came out about me, other than it was a conspiracy against me, literally, by Epstein and other people. But I think it's time now for the country to maybe get onto something else.
What would you say to people who feel like they haven't gotten justice, Mr. President?
Something that people care about.
Millions of Epstein-related files have been released since a law mandated their disclosure last year, including millions of pages, images, and videos published on Friday. The release came 6 weeks after the Justice Department missed a legal deadline set by a law signed by President Trump, following bipartisan pressure in Congress.
US President Donald Trump met with Colombian President Gustavo Petro at the White House on Tuesday for talks. The meeting comes just weeks after the United States had threatened military action against the South American nation. After their bilateral discussions, both leaders described their first face-to-face meeting as cordial.
Yeah, we did. We worked on it and we got along very well. He and I weren't exactly the best of friends, but I wasn't insulted because I never met him. I didn't know him at all. And we got along very well, and we're working on that. We're working on some other things too, including sanctions. And we had a very good meeting.
There were some people there I knew, some others, most I did not. But the conversation was with Trump. Basically that. And what Trump said in the meeting is that he does not believe in sanctions. In this particular case, he does not see them as rational. And I think he is right. It is the same thing, I think. This is not a path of sanctions. This is a path of freedom.
On Tuesday, Venezuela marked 1 month since the capture of former President Nicolas Maduro and his wife by United States forces. Maduro's supporters took to the streets of Caracas demanding his release, while the country's current leadership focuses on building new relations with Washington during a tense political transition.
Thousands of government supporters marched through the streets of Caracas on Tuesday to mark 1 month since the capture of former President Nicolas Maduro and his wife. They were demanding their release from United States custody. The march, organized by the government and attended by many public sector workers, stretched for several hundred meters. Trucks blared music as demonstrators moved from Plaza Venezuela towards Urdaneta Avenue in central Caracas. From a stage, Maduro's son, National Assembly Deputy Nicolas Maduro Guerra, addressed the crowds. He said the events of the 3rd of January, when US forces captured his father and his wife, would be remembered as a scar on the nation.
Today marks 1 month. 1 month since that January 3rd. That January 3rd when our homeland soil was desecrated by a foreign army. That January 3rd that will remain marked like a scar on our face forever.
Meanwhile, Venezuela's acting president, Delcy Rodriguez, has been building relations with the United States. On Tuesday, she said she had held telephone talks with senior US officials. She stressed the need for mutual respect between the two countries.
In recent days, I have held telephone conversations with President Donald Trump and Secretary of State Marco Rubio. This should be the way forward. Respect. Respect for international legality. Interpersonal respect. Knowing that we can build a good working agenda despite our differences.
Rodriguez's comments come as Venezuela navigates a complex political transition, 1 month after the US military operation that removed Nicolas Maduro from power.
The most prominent son of former Libyan leader Muammar Gaddafi, Saif al-Islam Gaddafi, has been killed, according to authorities. The Office of Libya's Attorney General said investigators and forensic doctors had examined the body on Tuesday and determined that he died from gunshot wounds. In a statement, the office said it was working to identify suspects. In 2015, a Libyan court passed a death sentence in absentia on him for suppressing peaceful protests during the country's 2011 revolution that ended his father's rule. The US brokered ceasefire is taking effect in northeastern Syria. Syrian government forces have now moved into the Kurdish-controlled cities of Hasaka and Qamishli under the agreement.
Syrian government security forces have entered the northeastern Kurdish-controlled cities of Hasaka and Qamishli, implementing the first phase of a US-brokered ceasefire agreement. The deployment comes after weeks of conflict in which the Kurdish-led Syrian Democratic Forces, the SDF, lost large areas of territory to Damascus. A convoy of military trucks entered Hasaka on Monday and then in Qamishli on Tuesday as the SDF imposed temporary curfews. The agreement, announced last Friday, aims to integrate Kurdish fighters into Syria's national army and police while bringing civilian institutions under central government control. Under the terms of the deal, government forces are to avoid Kurdish-majority neighbourhoods. Those small interior ministry units will take over state facilities such as civil registries, passport offices and airports. Kurdish local police will continue security operations in both cities before gradually merging with government forces. US officials have praised the agreement as an historic step toward national unity and reconciliation after more than 14 years of civil war. The SDF, once a key US ally against Islamic State, has seen its influence wane as Damascus reasserts control over Syria's northeast.
Who will be chosen to lead the next United Nations? The United Nations next, rather. The race for the Secretary-General's position has formally begun.
The United Nations is set to choose a new Secretary-General later this year, with the 5-year term beginning on January 1st, 2027, as Antonio Guterres prepares to step down. Although the role traditionally rotates among regions, diplomats say Latin America is widely seen as next in line, even as candidates from other regions remain possible. The selection process formally began in November 2025, when the presidents of the Security Council and General Assembly invited member states to submit nominations. Governments have until April 1st to put forward candidates, who will then take part in public interactive dialogues later that month to present their vision for the UN. 3 Latin American figures have so far emerged as leading contenders: former Chilean president and ex-UN human rights chief Michelle Bachelet, Rafael Grossi of Argentina, currently head of the International Atomic Energy Agency, and Costa Rica's Rebecca Greenspan, the Secretary-General of the UN Conference on Trade and Development. The Security Council will narrow the field through a series of closed-door straw polls, a process that requires the backing of all 5 permanent members: the United States, Russia, China, Britain and France. The General Assembly then votes on the final candidate, a step typically seen as a formality. Often described as part diplomat, part administrator, the UN Secretary-General oversees thousands of staff, multi-billion-dollar budgets and peacekeeping missions around the world. While the position carries limited formal power, the Secretary-General remains the UN's most influential global voice during times of crisis.
And now, after the break, we'll take a look at the major stories from the region. Stay with us.
As America sleeps, Europe is waking and the East has begun its day. A News is right here at the centre, bringing you the latest stories as they break. I'm Nadia Jani, here with you each weekday morning to share latest world news and the stories shaping our region. Across all platforms and wherever you get your news, we explore the context behind the big headlines. Live from Baku, I bring you a diverse mix of regional and international news, sport and politics for you, an audience that wants a bit more. So join me Monday to Friday for the latest headlines, expert analysis and live updates from around the world. Around the globe and live from Baku, this is Daybreak here on A News.
Inside Politics delves deeply into the heart of global issues shaping our world today. Join me for your go-to source of political analysis from across the region and beyond.
On World Business, we meet the boardroom leaders making market-moving decisions. And find out how leaders are dealing with continuous technological disruption.
Welcome back to A News. Now let's take a closer look at the key stories shaping the region. Ahead of the Zayed Award in Abu Dhabi, Azerbaijan and Armenia's leaders met to advance peace as both countries take steps towards normalization, while the ceremony also honors education and humanitarian initiatives. Andy Mioch has more.
Ahead of the Zayed Award for Human Fraternity annual ceremony here in Abu Dhabi that's set to honor the peace process between Azerbaijan and Armenia, the leaders of the two countries sat down to talk. The readout of the meeting between Azerbaijan's President Ilham Aliyev and Armenia's Prime Minister Nikol Pashinyan said that the two sides had agreed to continue working towards strengthening peace and stability between the countries. Now, this is not the first time that Aliyev and Pashinyan met for talks in the United Arab Emirates. The last time they spoke in Abu Dhabi was in July 2025, and that was just a month before the summit with US President Donald Trump in Washington that resulted in the initialing of a peace agreement aimed at ending decades of hostilities. The two countries have since taken several practical steps towards normalization, including allowing transport of goods for one another. Now, there's more cooperation in the cards, especially with the so-called Trump route for international peace and prosperity agreed in Washington that's meant to link Azerbaijan with its exclave Nakhchivan through Armenian territory. Now, the trip is also set to become a part of regional transit routes, and the supporters say that it will benefit not only the South Caucasus but broader trade networks as well. Back to today's events, the Zayed Award for Human Fraternity is also set to honor Afghan girls education advocate Zarqa Yaftali and Palestinian humanitarian organization Ta'awoon. From Abu Dhabi for A News, Andy Mir.
In Abu Dhabi, world leaders and humanitarian experts gathered for the third International Zayed Award for Human Fraternity Majlis. The gathering highlighted efforts to foster peace, understanding and cooperation across the world.
The third International Zayed Award for Human Fraternity Majlis took place at the newly inaugurated Zayed National Museum in Abu Dhabi on Tuesday. The gathering brought together world leaders, peace builders and humanitarian experts to discuss global challenges and promote coexistence, compassion and solidarity. For the first time, the Majlis was hosted at the Zayed National Museum, a landmark celebrating the life and legacy of the UAE's founding father, the late Sheikh Zayed bin Sultan Al Nahyan. Before the panel sessions, Saida Mirziyoyeva, head of the administration of the President of Uzbekistan and member of the Zayed Award Judging Committee, opened the event with remarks on behalf of this year's panel of judges. The first panel, titled Female Leadership at the Heart of Human Fraternity, highlighted the role of women in strengthening social cohesion and humanitarian values. Vice President of the Heydar Aliyev Foundation, Leyla Aliyeva, was among the panellists. Speaking at the session, she said that respect for different cultures, religions and traditions has always been an integral part of life in Azerbaijan. The Zayed Award for Human Fraternity remains an independent initiative celebrating individuals and institutions that champion solidarity, integrity and humanity across borders.
Iran's Ministry of Information and Communications Technology has unveiled images sent by its advanced indigenous Paya remote sensing Earth observation satellite, a move which ICT Minister Sayed Sattar Hashemi hailed as significant for the country's development.
Iran's Ministry of Information and Communications Technology officially displayed for the first time images captured by its Paya, also known as Tulu-3 Earth observation satellite. ICT Minister Sayed Sattar Hashemi showcased the images in a ceremony to commemorate the Space Technology Day in Iran on Tuesday. The minister said that the ICT Ministry has focused on manufacturing of remote sensing and telecommunication satellites to meet the national development needs. Last December, Paya, together with Zafar 2 and Kosar satellites, were launched aboard a Soyuz rocket from Vostochny spaceport complex in Russia's Far East region of Amur Oblast. Also known as Tulu-3, Paya is a remote sensing satellite with high-resolution imaging designed and built in cooperation with the Iranian electronics industries. According to the ICT Ministry, its AI-based image processing algorithms enhance data resolution to 3 meters after black and white and color images are captured by 2 sensors at a resolution of 5 and 10 meters, respectively. The Iranian minister stressed that international cooperation with friendly states was important for the development of the country's space industry. Turaj Shiralilu, Tehran, for A News.
Saudi Arabia is set to build a $2 billion wind farm in Turkey. It's after Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan and Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman met in Riyadh to discuss renewable energy projects as well as Syria's reconstruction.
Turkey and Saudi Arabia have signed an investment agreement worth around $2 billion covering solar and wind energy projects in Turkey. Saudi companies will build energy facilities with a total capacity of 5,000 megawatts. In the first phase, 2,000 megawatts of solar power plants will be constructed in the central provinces of Sivas and Karaman. The projects are expected to meet the needs of 2.1 million households. They will be implemented with 50% localization, with construction set to begin in 2027 and completion planned for 2028 to 2029. It's after Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan met Saudi Crown Prince Mohammed bin Salman in Riyadh to discuss Syria's reconstruction, regional cooperation, and the humanitarian situation in Gaza. They also discussed joint projects in electricity, energy storage, and clean hydrogen. Meanwhile, Erdogan affirmed Turkey's support for Syria's stability and called for greater international efforts to address the Gaza crisis. Both countries play a key role in regional and global energy markets and will expand cooperation in oil, petrochemicals, and renewable energy.
Business leaders and government officials from Central Asia and the United States are meeting in Bishkek for the B5+1 Business Forum. The two-day event follows the recent C5+1 Leaders Summit and focuses on expanding trade, investment and economic cooperation between the region and Washington. Our correspondent Fariza Kalimurzina reports from the Kyrgyz capital.
A two-day B5+1 Business Forum has opened in Bishkek with business leaders and government officials from Central Asia and the United States in attendance. The forum is a direct follow-up the historic C5+1 Leaders Summit and has established itself as a key platform for dialogue between Central Asian and US business communities. Over the next 2 days, participants will assess progress made since the first meeting in Almaty and present the roadmaps across priority areas ranging from critical minerals and information technologies to transport, logistics and agriculture. The United States views Central Asia as a priority region for foreign economic cooperation over the next 3 years. This was stated by the U.S. Special Envoy for South and Central Asia, Sergio Gore, speaking at the B5+1 forum in Bishkek. According to him, the administration of U.S. President Donald Trump intends to recalibrate Washington's approach to the region by strengthening practical engagement through business and investment. Gore noted that one of the largest U.S. commercial delegations ever to visit the region has arrived in Bishkek. He described this as a foundation for expanding trade and economic ties.
I was looking at the list of the U.S. companies that are visiting here, and I think it's fair to say it's one of the largest and most significant commercial delegations to visit this part of the world. So we hope to build upon that over the next months, over the next years. This is just the beginning. Our companies being here opens the door to cooperation between these 5 incredible nations and the United States. And so we hope to follow up. The United States stands behind the American companies to ensure success. So we're very much looking forward to doing that.
Among the priority areas for cooperation, the U.S. envoy highlighted e-commerce, artificial intelligence, critical minerals, agriculture, and transport infrastructure. Sergio Gore arrived in Kyrgyzstan on a 4-day official visit at the invitation of the Bishkek authorities. According to the press secretary of the President of the Kyrgyz Republic, Askat Alagozov, the visit agenda includes a personal meeting with President Sadr Japarov. As for the business forum itself, more than 300 participants from Central Asia and the United States are taking part today. Panel discussions focus on strengthening the business environment in key sectors and encouraging U.S. private investment in Central Asia. The forum will conclude with the signing of a communique. It will outline an updated action plan aimed at attracting investment and integrating Central Asian economies into global markets. And we will continue our coverage of this important regional event over the next 2 days. Fariza Kalimurzina, Bishkek, Kyrgyzstan, for A News.
The United Nations Security Council is preparing to vote later this month on whether to extend the mandate of the monitoring team that supports the Afghanistan sanctions regime. If approved, the decision would keep existing UN sanctions on Taliban-linked individuals and entities in place, including travel bans, asset freezes and an arms embargo. Our correspondent Tamim Bahis has the details from Kabul.
The mandate of the monitoring team that supports the Afghanistan 1988 Sanctions Committee is due to expire on February 17. Security Council members are expected to vote before that deadline on whether to extend the mandate, which plays a key role in overseeing the implementation of sanctions related to Afghanistan. If renewed, the existing sanctions regime would continue without change. These measures target individuals and entities associated with the Taliban. The sanctions include travel bans, assets freezes, and an arms embargo. A humanitarian exemption approved in late 2021 remains the only significant adjustment made to the regime since the Taliban returned to power. Diplomats say discussions on the mandate have focused on ongoing concerns about security, governance, and human rights in Afghanistan. The monitoring team also provides support to the UN Sanctions Committee overseeing ISIS and Al-Qaeda. That mandate, under a separate Security Council resolution adopted last year, runs until June 2027. The outcome of this month's vote will determine whether Afghanistan monitoring team continues its work for another year. Tamim Bahis in Kabul, A News.
Georgia's ruling party has pushed through one of its most far-reaching legislative initiatives to date, a package of laws that reshapes the rules on grants, political activity and foreign funding. Supporters call it a matter of sovereignty. Critics warn it marks a decisive turn away from democracy. Our correspondent reports from Tbilisi.
With 82 votes in favor and just 10 against, Georgia's parliament has taken a decisive step towards tightening state control over politics, funding and civic space. In a first reading, lawmakers approved a sweeping legislative package introduced by the ruling Georgian Dream faction. The changes span multiple laws, including the law on grants, the criminal code, election and party financing regulations, and introduce new restrictions, prohibitions, and criminal sanctions. At the core of the package is a redefinition of what constitutes a grant. Under the amendments, virtually any financial or in-kind support, including expertise, services, or technical assistance that could influence political or public processes, would require prior government approval. Receiving such funding without consent could result in heavy fines, community service, or even prison sentences of up to 6 years. Political parties and their leaders face criminal liability for accepting foreign funding. External lobbying is also criminalized. New rules restrict party membership for individuals employed by organizations receiving significant foreign income, while the State Audit Office gains expanded oversight powers. The ruling party says the goal is to protect Georgia's sovereignty from foreign influence. However, opponents argue that the laws give the government unprecedented leverage over civil society, political opponents, media, and activists. The reaction from Brussels has been sharp. I cannot support a government that acts against its own people, said EU Commissioner for Enlargement, Marta Kos, warning that Georgia is moving farther away from its European future and calling on the government to stop this absurdity. EU Foreign Policy Chief Kaja Kallas said that the bloc expects to take steps in response, stressing that freedom of the press and fundamental rights are at stake. Inside Georgia, demonstrators, opposition parties, and civil society groups say that the legislation brings the country closer than ever to autocracy and farther from the European path endorsed by voters. Nini Nikolaishvili, Tbilisi, A News.
A News Investigations presents a deep dive into how wealth and influence are transformed into political power beyond official institutions. The Oligarch's Design examines the case of Ruben Vardanyan using international reporting and expert insight to map the hidden networks connecting finance and geopolitics.
Ruben Vardanyan.
Mr. Vardanyan, thank you for being with us.
Troika.
A
A News original documentary The Oligarch's Design explores how power and influence can be built outside formal politics, through financial networks, philanthropy, and carefully shaped public narratives. The documentary tracks Ruben Vardanyan's move from Moscow's financial circles to politics in the unrecognized separatist regime in 2022. Filmed across Italy, Lithuania, the United Kingdom, the United States, Armenia, Israel, Ukraine, and Azerbaijan, the documentary features versatile insights from the experts.
All connections what Ruben Vardanyan has with Russian military-industrial complex will have result that Ruben Vardanyan will be sanctioned in EU, in USA, and the United Kingdom, and other. And exit from Russian citizenship, it's very good decision for avoid sanction.
Russian oligarchs are not individual actors. They know that they are captured by the Russian state. The Russian intelligence officers control them. They know that if they don't do what the intelligence officer or what the Kremlin tells them to do, they will either lose their money or they will be killed or they will go to jail.
The investigation is based on open source data and earlier international reports that revealed the Troika Laundromat, a major offshore scheme used to move billions of dollars. The Oligarch's Design marks the debut of the A News Investigations documentary series.
You're up to date with world news for the hour. Thank you for watching and stay tuned to A News.